3, 2, 1. What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Here the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameDay.com. We are here live on a wonderful, fantastic Wednesday evening, and the Florida State Seminoles are now ranked number 4 in the country after obliterating the LSU Tigers with true dominance on Sunday night, Labor Day weekend. And Brian Kelly having some interesting remarks after the game, having some questions about his own team, his own players, his coaches. Seems like Mike Norvell got into their heads quite a bit during that game and afterward. But we'll be discussing a little bit more of that Florida State versus LSU game, given our last thoughts there. We'll talk about who flashed offensively and defensively to us. And then also we'll talk about these latest rankings on the AP poll. We'll talk observations from practices this week. We'll talk a little bit of the ACC and what's going on there after Duke had a big-time upset at home against Dabo Swinney and the Tigers. And then we'll finish off the show with a short kind of Southern Miss game preview, and we'll jump into our score predictions to finish this off. As always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, feel free to hit that like button. Make sure you're commenting if you have any topics or questions you guys would like us to discuss. It would be greatly appreciated. Go ahead and jump in there. And also make sure you subscribe on whichever audio platform that you use, so then you get notified every time we release a new episode. With me this evening is Austin Veazey, our lead basketball writer at Nole Game Day, and our lead game preview guy this season, worth noting as well. So he can do both. And then Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief at NoleGameDay.com, who stayed up till 6:30 a.m. on Monday morning after the game to make sure you guys were fulfilled with content. Gentlemen, we're here. It's fun to do these shows when Florida State's at this caliber of a program. I'm excited to be on here with you guys this evening.
It's been a long couple of days, but I mean, a pretty good couple of days if you're a Florida State fan. I mean, going all the way back to Sunday night with the celebrations in Orlando and then having the AP poll drop yesterday. You know, it's an exciting time to be a Seminole fan. You know, like you said, Logan, this is somewhere that the program hasn't been in quite a long time, and it's still the very beginning of the season, though. So they've got a long way to go from here. And, I mean, really, you know, you've just got to take it week by week and not get caught up in the hype.
It's a lot easier to put in the extra work when it's the number 4 team in the country, not a 3-6 team like they were just 3 years ago.
Yeah, we were talking about it in the production meeting, VZ. You know, we've come a long way to this. And I think it's worth noting, too, from Dustin saying, you know, you don't want to just hold on to that hype there and lose it. And you just kind of overthink yourself on a few things. That's what this team could easily do. So it's going to come down to coaching here. And most certainly Mike Norvell, your biggest leader there, making sure you're dialed in and focused. And I thought it was good hearing that from the locker room speech afterwards. Mike Norvell pressing hard on these guys, saying, hey, let's make sure that we go. You might have an off day tomorrow, but you're going to make sure you go and do all your training stuff, go and get your rehab done, so then you're ready for practice this upcoming week, because it is a short week. It feels like Florida State just played, and now we're previewing the next game. That's what happens when you play on a Sunday night, and you're playing a Southern Miss team, too, who would love to wreck and make some kind of upset here. But, you know, with Mike Norvell, I think a lot of things have been changed on making sure everyone's focused. But that's the part of it now. Every team, when you're highly ranked like this, they want to come for your throat and make sure that they do it on national television, and so then they can get their program out in front of everybody. So this team's got to stay dialed in, and they can't just ride off of the wave that they came off of on Sunday night.
You were going to get everyone's best at this point. I mean, from now to the remainder of this season. And I mean, frankly, we all remember the last time that Florida State played on a Labor Day Sunday and then had a game 6 days later. They were upset in Doak Campbell Stadium by a huge underdog, an FCS team in Jacksonville State. So, I mean, I'm sure Mike Norvell is reminding his club that, I mean, just 2 years ago, look at the position you were in. And, you know, it's good to be where you are right now, 1-0, but you've still got to go take care of business. And it's a little bit tougher when you've got one less day to prepare. But, I mean, in the same vein, you know, Mike Norvell is someone that never overlooks any opportunity. And, I mean, he even said yesterday during his press conference, this is a game that Florida State has been thinking about and preparing for since the summer. So, I mean, they're completely dialed in despite being a huge favorite going into Saturday night.
And it's not like Southern Miss is a bad team. They got some talented pieces, and they beat Tulane last year, and Tulane was really, really good last year. So, you know, anything can happen.
Yeah, no, it most certainly can. But I just going off the bat, we'll go talk about that game here in just a little bit between Florida State and Southern Miss. But I think this team has a lot of maturity had to happen. And, I think we've seen that growth there, which is a huge, huge importance of not overlooking teams, no matter who they are in the ACC as well, because Florida State still is going to face some teams that have talent. And, just a given on someone's good night, they could bring it all. And, Florida State could be put in a tough spot. So nonetheless, Mike Norvell and the coaching staff are going to have to do a good job of making sure the guys are focused. But I wanted to give a last kind of thoughts from each of us on this game as we had our instant reaction. If you guys want to go listen to that, you guys can. We recorded it about an hour after the game, after listening to press conferences. But, VZ, you were saying that in the production meeting, you sat down and were able to watch two angles of the game back to back, and you watched them through. What kind of stood out to you, maybe a player or two, offensively, defensively, that you noted down today?
I mean, we talked about it Sunday night, but the physicality of the defensive line was just incredible. Braden Fisk, Josh Farmer, even to a point, Fabian Lovett, they were just creating so much havoc in the middle of that defense and allowed the linebackers and the safeties to make plays. There were so many times where, there was even Fisk getting held early in the game, getting penetration early. They just did such a great job of blowing up the run game. And if LSU's not getting that run game going, it's really hard for them to find that consistency on offense. The other player that I don't think we mentioned at all Sunday night was Greedy Vance. He made a couple plays in the first quarter where I was like, this guy's coming to bring it. And the first one was that third down, that first goal line that LSU had. Jaden Daniels' first read was a screen on the right side, wide receiver screen that they're trying to set up. And Greedy Vance pushes his receiver into the play, blows it up. So Daniels is forced off that read. If he stays there, it becomes open. But instead, he has to throw it to Neighbors in the back of the end zone, and it's out of bounds. Then late in the first quarter, he does a phenomenal job on this mesh route. Man coverage all the way across the field, blows up the receiver. It's a gain of 0. I thought he did such a great job of setting the tone with his physicality, and it kind of spread to the rest of the team. We saw DJ Lundy make plays, obviously. It was just a really physical defense, and it was fun to see.
Yeah, I mean, that was huge to see from Greedy. He was someone that we've talked about throughout the preseason as someone that's become more consistent. I mean, just looks a lot more comfortable going into his second year at Florida State. And like you said, Austin, we saw some of that on Sunday night. And just to your point with the defensive line, I mean, man, wherever, it didn't matter if it was the interior, the defensive ends. I mean, FSU absolutely dominated that matchup against LSU's offensive line for the majority of that game. And I feel like that says a lot. I mean, it was a lot more even last year. I mean, Florida State obviously had some really breakout moments with Jared Verse having that game he did, but the difference in physicality that we saw on Sunday night, especially when you started getting into the second half, and I mean, by the fourth quarter, LSU's offensive line just didn't look like they wanted to even go at it even more. And, for Florida State moving into the rest of your schedule, I don't think there's another offensive line that's better than what they faced on Sunday night. So I'm just wondering what we're going to see over the next couple of weeks if this team keeps living up to its potential each Saturday.
Yeah, Verse didn't even have as big of a game as we all thought he might have, and I think he was still credited with 3 hurries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not counting on a few of those holds as well, along with Braden Fisk, too, that we were calling those out in the press box. It was hilarious, too. Being able to see the national television also give some shots towards the refs during that game. I mean, it just seemed like they were going after any kind of flag they could, even after the Tatum Bethune hit that he put on Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is jumping. He's got the ball in his hand. He's up in the air. It's football. This isn't tennis or golf. You're going to get effing hit. And the ref's still trying to get up in his face. And Tatum, nobody's even, it's so funny. I mean, not funny, but it's just great to see the maturity, too, from this team defensively. Nobody was trying to stir up or cause any problems. They could have easily, because LSU's players were going right after Tatum Bethune, but the refs went immediately right into Bethune's face and trying to stir some stuff up and rile everyone up and everything. But Verse and the other players just looking around like, what's going on here? Tatum just licked the defensive or the offensive quarterback, and now they're just getting ready for the next play. But, the refs trying to stir some things up. But definitely some missed calls there between Braden Fisk, Briggs as well. and definitely verse. But that defensive line just showed their true dominance and their tenacity that could really be a game changer. And I think that's something that Florida State is going to be able to utilize all throughout the season if they're able to stay healthy there. And two, I don't think Fabo's fully at 100% either. That's a guy that will continue to monitor going throughout the season and getting more plays. I think he played around 20 snaps. Yep. Was it VZ?
Yep, right at 20.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we saw a ton of Farmer. So once Fabo kind of gets clicking there as well inside the trenches, it becomes a monster. And then you also, too, Dustin, you and I were in the press box. Daniel Lyons with the big play as well on Sunday evening. Someone that isn't talked about a whole ton, but has shown some signs of growth as well, too. And they're going to look for him to be a big part in that defensive tackle room going into 2024. So just some building guys and some depth there that you can work with. But I just love seeing, Briggs, a guy that's been around the program for such a long while, be able to make some plays, and, he deserves it.
Just really impressive. We talked about Florida State going 5 or 6 deep in that interior defensive line, and they did it against one of the best teams that they're going to face this season on Sunday night. And I mean, all 5, 6 of those guys that were contributing throughout the game, they all made impacts at different points. And, it just goes to show how much deeper that unit is than where they were a season ago. And it's going to be a big strength for Florida State's defense to rely on throughout the year.
Yeah, they played 6 guys, and 5 of them played at least 19 snaps. So just really speaks to that depth in the middle of that line.
Spreading the love.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of spreading the love, too, someone that was getting a lot of love on national television was also Rodney Hill, who we'd been talking about this whole entire offseason, but showing his physicality. And I think we're going to see quite a bit of him. And I think they're starting to utilize Toa Philly in the right way as well. Obviously having that big play there and Perkins grabbing him right at the goal line. But Florida State's running back room, once Trey Benson can kind of get clicking as well, I just think it's going to be hard to keep Rodney Hill off the field, definitely in this offense where you can navigate a lot of different players. We saw Jaheim Bell to take that sweep and carry it in, and it just looks so easy. Some that stood out to me primarily, and this was more in the beginning of the game, I think some adjustments were made during halftime, but blocking and primarily to the tight ends, Morlock, Keon Coleman at the wide receiver position, to Jaheim Bell too. It was really lacking in that first half, and that's what I was mentioning over there to you, Dustin. If some of these wide receivers, if they can continue their block, shout out to Hakeem Williams, another freshman, just like Malik McLean. Whenever he showed up, he put on a show in blocking, showed his true physicality. But Keon, Jaheim, Morlock kind of had an iffy night on that. If they're able to build some consistency there and make sure they take care of their assignments, this opens up a whole lot of different plays for your guys in the backfield, including also Jordan Travis. Something that's got to improve. It definitely does. And that's a first game. It's going to happen. You don't have your week 0 game anymore. You don't have that like last year to try to fix these problems. But going into week 2, that's something that I do want to see an improvement on.
I'm with you on that. Florida State could definitely use some more consistency blocking wise out of their skill players. We've talked about the wide receiver position at FSU. And I mean, to get on the field in Tallahassee, you've got to be a good receiver, but you've also got to be able to block, because that's something that they rely on a ton. And there were just times in the first half where it just didn't feel like they were totally engaged with that effort. But then we saw that start to flip in the third and fourth quarter. And I mean, that's something that Mike Norvell pushes these guys at practice on every single day. So, I think, it's easy for a guy like Keon Coleman, who's a star, maybe to slack off for a play. Finding that consistency is going to be huge moving forward for this team if they want to reach their potential. But going to your point on Hakeem Williams, I mean, that was the guy out there on Rodney Hill's run, out there getting some space for him, and says a lot about his development, because, I mean, he was another one where Florida State had to work to get him involved in that blocking game. And to see him out there on Sunday night, taking advantage of it, showing those improvements on the national stage, says a lot about the former 5-star.
Yeah, to your point about the blocking, especially from the tight ends, I think a lot of it's just, Morlock's wasn't really used to doing that last year, shorter. And, he's still getting used to what he's supposed to do on these counter plays. I think it got cleaned up a little bit in the second half, like you mentioned, and putting Jaheim Bell in the backfield kind of just simplified all those blocking assignments. And it wasn't like Morlock was having to make a choice between a few players. He could just go and hit somebody. But it's going to get cleaned up. It's going to get a little bit easier for these guys when they're playing Southern Miss and Boston College these next couple games, instead of playing LSU.
Yeah, 100% it will. But yeah, here's the run here. And you can tell with Rodney Hill, but look at Hakeem Williams right here. That's exactly what we saw from Malik
You
McLean
also
during
got
his freshman year.
Preston. Sorry to interrupt you. You also got Preston Daniel getting a seal in there too.
Yeah, but I want to see Deuce here. He might have done some stuff in the slot.
It's hard to tell. Hard to tell from the angle, though.
No, never mind. Never mind. I thought he pushed him to the ground, but no, he didn't. But yeah, that's what's going to keep you on the field in Mike Norvell's offense, no matter what. But yeah, then you of course you've got Rodney Hill here, laying down the hammer, get off me.
We've been talking about him for over a year at this point, and I've always felt confident that when the time came, he'd be able to step into that number 3 or number 2 spot for Florida State. And you got to like the couple of flashes you saw on Sunday night. That's just going to keep coming. And I really feel like that performance against LSU kind of sparked a little bit of confidence in Rodney, because the last 2 days of practice, Tuesday and today, I mean, he's been phenomenal.
What has stood out to him? I know we'll talk about practice observations, which we might transition into, but what has stood out the most when you're talking about him like that?
Just seems so confident out there. I mean, not second guessing himself. As soon as the hole's there, bang, he's hitting it and he's gone. And I also just like the way that this running back group in general, after someone takes a rep, they're all coming off to the side and they're all talking with each other about, hey, you could have done this. Your eyes could have been here. You could have hit this hole. It's really fun to see that group in action each day at practice with how much they support one another.
I want to know who this is in the back here with him saying, "Oh my goodness." I don't think Twitter found it yet.
It's Xavier Rhodes.
Is that Xavier back there?
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, you're a Viking. Yeah, that does look like Xavier now. That makes sense. Look at Xavier Rhodes' face right here and the baseball cap backwards. I don't know if anybody actually caught that on Twitter.
I saw someone tweet it.
Did they?
Yeah, so someone said, look at Xavier Rhodes. I forget who it was, but
that's awesome. That's awesome. A lot of former Noles too in attendance there. Wow. I think Mike Norvell posted on Instagram a whole group of them. Whenever Mike Norvell was coming out of the tunnel, even he was dapping up Danny Cannell, former FSU quarterback that did some damage during his time in Tallahassee. So a lot of greats. Also too, I saw on the broadcast seeing Derek Brooks kind of nudging Mike Norvell in the fourth quarter there, and Mike just staying fully focused, keyed in on the game was just really great. And if Derek Brooks is giving you some support and giving you the nod like that, then that means you're doing something good. But just to see a lot of the alumni hyped up afterward was really, really good to see. And that's something that Mike Norvell has been trying to build. But I think Mike Norvell's focus is getting answers done on the field first, and then we'll work on doing all the PR stuff later and building those relationships. And they're showing answers. And a lot of these former Noles, you saw Jalen Ramsey while we were covering the game. This man was almost live tweeting, taking over my job over here, but Jalen Ramsey fully involved in what was going on Sunday night. Just really cool to see these Seminole greats showing some love to this Florida State team. It's easier when the team's good, but it's showcasing across the country.
But even still, I mean, Mike Norvell has made a big effort to reach out to these guys, a ton of guys that he obviously didn't coach at Florida State, but guys that are Seminole greats and did a lot in Garnet and Gold before moving on to the NFL or other ventures. He's done a lot of this, and the coaches themselves reaching out, trying to get these guys back on campus. We saw them host the Seminole Legacy recruiting weekend back in March, and there were a lot of guys, including Jameis Winston, who came through, and you had Jermaine Johnson having his All-American brick ceremony there outside of the Moore Center. So, I mean, it's really cool to see how they're not just focused on these guys during the 4 to 5 years that they're at Florida State, but, I mean, they're still keeping up with them, once they move on to the next step in their respective lives. And like I said, I think it's even cooler that Mike Norvell has made such an effort to reach out to these guys that he didn't necessarily have a relationship with or even coach in Tallahassee.
And it's a far cry from where they were 3-4 years ago, where, some of these former players are complaining about not seeing the support from the current coaching staff. But you look at that picture that he posted on Instagram, it's Andre Wadsworth, Derek Brooks, Warwick Dunn, Leroy Butler, Peter Warwick, Brian McFadden, obviously Xavier Rhodes. I think I heard Darnell Dockett was at the game.
Yeah.
These great former players that we really haven't seen on the sidelines for Florida State at this game, showing some love. Like honestly, Xavier Rhodes being on the sideline was kind of a surprise to me.
Yeah, no, that was dope. Darnell Dockett being there, I was like, who got Darnell Dockett to get to the damn game? I wonder how that happened, but yeah, I wasn't shocked by that. But whole ton of former Noles too. We went by James Coleman's tailgate before the game began, and a lot of former Noles there as well. I think Peter Work also showed up to there, but also shout out to our Hear the Spear listeners all throughout the weekend between the Saturday night before kickoff on Sunday. Got to meet a lot of y'all downtown, and then also game day. Super appreciative of y'all listening and giving us some love, and also a lot of y'all coming up saying y'all are in the Discord as well. So really, really cool weekend for us. And, it always shocks me that you guys listen to us on a weekly basis. It freaks me out a little bit, but you guys rock, and super appreciative of y'all hanging out with us every week. Anything else worth noting from the game? I know we did a full-on 30-minute recap, instant reaction afterward, but I think there's a good comment in here as well. And we mentioned it too, health-wise. This game from last year, a lot of guys were banged up. And, from our guy Jen here on YouTube, or lady, could be lady or guy, I don't know, Jen, let us know in the comments, please. But it says, didn't hear about any other players getting injured in this game either, which is great. We kind of had some question marks there about Dimitri Emmanuel a little bit there, maybe getting dinged up a tiny bit. But for the most part, this team came back pretty cleaned up, as you could probably tell, though, at practices this week, Dustin. These guys, it was a physical game nonetheless, and Florida State might have brought the hammer a little bit more, but that's a good squad and not an easy defense to go against or offense. It's going to be a physical game.
We were keeping a close eye on things on Sunday night. I think, like you said, the only two guys that we really noted throughout the game that might have gotten dinged up were Dimitri Emmanuel, and then we also saw Robert Scott get removed pretty early on, switched out for Bless Harris at that left tackle position, and he didn't return as well. But I mean, Mike Norvell said, I believe yesterday, Florida State didn't really come out with any major injuries from the game, and I think this one, they're a lot healthier coming out of it than they were a season ago, which says a lot about the strength and conditioning program they went through this offseason. And then also the amount of depth that Florida State has on both sides of the ball. It didn't feel like they were really having to overstress anyone on Sunday night. Like we said with the interior defensive line, you constantly had guys switching in and out. And I mean, that was pretty consistent for the majority of positions on both sides of the ball. A lot of guys got reps, and that's huge as far as preventing injuries.
I honestly think with Robert Scott, I think they just ended up liking the matchup of Bless Harris better. He's a little bit bigger, a little bit more physical. And when you've got a guy like Marquivas Wingo on that defensive line who was just insane, his get off the line and his physicality is second to none. Honestly, it's one of the craziest I've ever seen. So I think they just ended up liking Bless Harris better there. And I think Meach actually came in at left guard a little bit towards the end of the game. Just speaking more to that ability to rotate all these offensive linemen. You think of them as a right guard. They put in Keandre Jones there for a little bit, and then they ended up putting Meach back in at left guard.
Yeah, I mean, I could have seen it being a matchup thing with Robert Scott, but at the same time, I mean, he did have what appeared to be a noticeable limp on the sidelines throughout the game. But I mean, he was still engaged throughout, so I mean, that's probably huge for FSU moving forward. But I think the only thing that I really have left just to kind of close out of LSU talk is just the energy that Florida State is bringing in 2023. It feels a little bit different than the past couple of years. And I mean that from Mike Norvell all the way to the roster, in that fourth quarter against LSU, after they had scored that touchdown to go up 14, Florida State, they could have gotten conservative when they stopped LSU on that fourth down attempt, or I think they made a punt it back. Either way, whenever they got the ball back, they could have been conservative, tried to run some time off the clock. Instead, they went for the dagger with Jaheim Bell with that long touchdown. And then you come back the next drive, and once again, that was after the fourth down stop. Florida State could have got conservative, ran some clock out. Nope. Once again, Mike Norvell going down there. You got inside the 10, and I was even thinking, all right, they're going to just run some clock. No, you give it to Jaheim Bell and let him go run someone over in the end zone. Yeah. So just seeing Mike Norvell, I mean, go out there and absolutely bury LSU. I mean, he was out for blood on Sunday night, and I think that was a true statement of the energy Florida State's trying to bring each week.
Yeah, no, that handoff too was seamless. It was gorgeous. They had practiced that quite a bit. You could tell during fall camp. That was just looked beautiful. That handoff was from JT over to Jaheim Bell. It worked perfectly. Good note here from in the defensive backfield, Shyheim Brown. Per PFF, saying most coverage snaps played without getting targeted in week 1, and it's Shyheim Brown with 38. So worth noting there, a guy who we think has a extremely high ceiling, did pretty good at protecting downfield on Sunday night against LSU and Jaden Daniels.
And not just downfield, that second fourth down stop for the defense was mainly Shyheim Brown. He stood right in that gap where Jaden Daniels was rolling, and then Joshua Farmer came in and helped blow it up.
He was very good on Sunday night, and no surprise. I did project him to be my breakout player of the year for Florida State, so no surprise. If you listen to this show, you've heard plenty about Shyheim over the past couple of weeks.
Yep.
Yep, and we all start off the season 1-0. 1-0. So that works out well. We'll take that. We most certainly will. We'll see if that continues. I think it should, going outside of week 2, going to week 3, but we'll see. Maybe someone's going to switch it up. I don't think so. No.
Watch out.
If you're
Golden Eagles coming to town.
Yep. You better keep an eye on it. But there's one more comment on here just talking about national attention, practically 10 million plus viewers over that entire broadcast, peaking, I think, at 10 plus million. Just goes to show branding wise, biggest game on. I mean, not saying that there was some other bigger games on during the weekend, but still, that's a really, really impressive stat that Florida State can use as some ammo to some of these conferences that may be bidding for their duties in the near future. But yeah, a lot of people, a lot of national attention. I think going to the AP poll now, guys, Florida State being ranked number 4 in the country. I want to note too, we know 2 people that had voted for Florida State being number 1. That's Brett McMurphy, and then also Reese Davis from College Game Day. Don't know who maybe the third person may be, but still
find it real quick.
Yeah, see if you might want to find that. We'll give them their credit. Got to give them their credit where it may be due here. But I'm going to bring up the AP poll for you guys here in a second. But we had kind of all in the instant reaction had thought 5 around there, and then I kind of started hearing all these other national guys like Brett, also Reese showing some love at 1. I'm like, I think Florida State's really going to peak up and get up there to number 4, guys, and went with my gut on Monday before things were released, and then yesterday, Florida State coming out and now being a number 4 team in the country. What a turn of events in the last 2 years for the Seminoles of Mike Norvell.
The other guy was David Jablonski. I think it's going to be how you pronounce it.
Okay. Do we have his outlet?
Do
we know? It's down there. Got to give
of the Dayton Daily News.
Dayton Daily News. Okay. All right. Well, Florida State, actually worth noting as well, got the second most first place votes behind Georgia. Not close in margin there whatsoever, but Georgia getting 58, Florida State getting 3, and then Michigan getting 2, Alabama 0. But Florida State moving up 4 spots. Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Alabama 3, Florida State 4, Ohio State number 5, USC 6, Penn State 7, Washington 8, Tennessee 9, and then Notre Dame 10 there. So y'all's thoughts on this? Look at this. I mean, could this be a potential look at a college football playoff right here? I mean, a lot of people projected this to be a lineup during this offseason.
It's been a long time since you've seen Florida State up here in these rankings with some of these other prestigious college football programs. You know, it says a lot about the progress that the Seminoles have made over the last couple of years. And like I said, it's only week 2, but I mean, if they just continue to take it game by game, week by week, sky is really the limit with this team. If they're able to take down Clemson in 2 weeks, I mean, this schedule, the final 2/3 of it is extremely favorable for Florida State. So, I mean, it's huge to be in the top 5 for the first time outside of preseason rankings for the first time since 2016. I think Florida State got up to number 3 at that point, but got to keep going. As Mike Norvell would say, a long way to climb.
Yeah, I'm still a little surprised they went ahead and moved Ohio State down, just because Ohio State did win a league game on the road to start the season. Even if they didn't look that impressive, it's week 1, things will get sorted out. It'll be interesting to see what happens to these rankings over the next couple of weeks. I think Alabama plays Texas this weekend.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I believe, Clemson dropping all the way down to 25 after their loss to Duke. Duke now being ranked 21st. Everybody's making – I mean, Duke's got a tough schedule ahead. Don't get me wrong whatsoever, but I was getting flamed that I believe Duke would beat Clemson and also maybe Duke would reach that ACC championship. But, Duke put on a show, and Clemson making a ton of errors and a lot of mistakes too. You could tell that they were in week 1, but I was not too impressed with Klubnik, the quarterback there for the Tigers. I mean,
why do you bring in an offensive coordinator like Garrett Riley and then still keep running the same system you've been running for the last 3-4 years? That's what made no sense to me. The Clemson offense just looked horrible, especially down the stretch. They didn't know what to do with the football was the biggest thing.
I also just thought they got extremely unlucky in that game. I mean, they had a weird fumble, a blocked field goal, a shanked field goal that was attempted from like inside the 10. Then you throw it past your best player, bounces off his hands, it gets picked off. I mean, when has that ever happened in Will Shipley's entire life? That was probably the first time.
That missed field goal was so funny. It came on the heels of them going, oh, he can kick from 70, and then he missed from like 22. It was unbelievable timing. But like, so if you go all of Clemson's drive after they scored that touchdown in the second quarter, it went punt, end of half, missed field goal, fumble, turnover on downs, interception, turnover on downs. Like, just a complete Clemsoning that we haven't been able to talk about in quite a while.
3 losses in the last 4 games, correct, for the Tigers?
Yep. And I'll be honest, I was rooting for Clemson, guys, because, I mean, now we got to think, what does this do to Florida State's strength of schedule moving forward? And, I mean, that's something that can be held against them in a potential playoff resume. And now I think, before we were talking about maybe Florida State can lose 1 game and still make the playoff. Now I feel like you have to run the table.
It's either way, it comes down to Florida State being able to handle their own business and handling their own expectations. As long as they do what they think they can do, they won't have to worry about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Week by week, take care of business, and you'll put yourself where you need to be. And, the main focus right now is taking care of your ACC opponents moving forward. Once we get out of this Southern Miss game this upcoming weekend, Florida State is going to have to go against their conference. The best 2 teams are going to make it to Charlotte. So, Florida State's got to have that focus and get there first before anything else. But just going off of the ACC slate this last weekend, seems like Florida State's put themselves in a pretty good spot. And now that homecoming game against Duke is going to be a fun one on October 21st. It seems like Duke brought a lot of physicality, and I'm not used to seeing Duke bring that kind of physicality. They're well coached and disciplined as well.
They got a good defensive line. They were creating some pressure with their front 4, and Clemson's offensive line wasn't really doing a good job with it. And that's an offensive line that's got a lot of talent.
I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've been high on Duke for a minute.
Not as high as me. Well, we're there. We're both high. Are we? We both predicted 31-20, though, and our margin wasn't that close.
We still weren't even close. Yeah.
I know. Craziness. Brian Kelly's hilarious. That man is so much. He's just hilarious to listen to post game. Definitely when he loses, it just starts to become his brain wants to blame everybody else and everything, and then not take it. And
he did start out saying I didn't coach these guys well enough, but then to go and say we're not the team we thought we were was like, I mean, you could have said something else.
He's hilarious. He's not one of the most liked coaches in football, anyways. But
I'm so glad he's not. I'm so glad he's not a head coach of the university I went to.
Mm-hmm. And they just announced too they're going to be kicking off against USC next year.
Vegas. Yeah, in Vegas.
Yeah, man, LSU is just having a rough Like,
But USC won't have Caleb Williams next year.
Whoa. Caleb Williams said he's going to evaluate, and he said that he's going to maybe stick around if he doesn't like the team that picks him overall pick.
Let's be realistic.
Yeah, I hate hearing that crap. It's so dramatic. Get a grip. All right, let's we talked ACC, we talked rankings. Let's jump into some practice observations before we get going with this upcoming weekend's game, where it's going to be a late night kickoff for the Seminoles at 8:30. But practice observations, D-Lou, I know a lot of people were talking about in here. Health-wise, how are things looking with some of the players and such? But how has the energy looked right now after that game to you? Do these guys look like they're kind of whooped, or do they seem like they're dialed in and things are the regular how you saw in fall camp?
That was something I really wanted to see coming into the week, to see how Florida State was going to come out and attack these last 2 days of practice following an emotional and, frankly, a physical win against LSU. And, they just went right back to work. Mike Norvell said that Tuesday was their first time getting back on the field since the LSU game. And, they came out there in full pads, and you had guys getting after it. And, they returned to it today, Wednesday morning, same thing, full pads, and a lot of popping with only a couple days to go until they take on Southern Miss on Saturday night. And as far as guys that have flashed to me this week, on Tuesday morning, it was actually Fabian Lovett having a couple dominant efforts, and this thing, basically a drill where there's 3 offensive linemen and they're matched up against 2 defensive linemen, and you've got guys fighting for space there at the line of scrimmage. Fabian Lovett had a couple of excellent reps, and then today he came back in team drills and was able to get a sack on AJ Duffy when he was rolling out of the pocket, came back on the next play and combined for a tackle for loss with another defender. So some positive signs out of Fabian. And then also Kevin Knowles. He was spectacular on Wednesday, had 2 interceptions throughout practice, there was a pass on the sideline to Johnny Wilson where it's like, all right, Johnny's going to catch that and turn upfield. And he went to complete the catch. And as he's pulling it in, Kevin Knowles arrives, delivers a hit, and popped it out. The ball went out of bounds, but if it didn't, that might have been a live fumble. So, could have forced 3 turnovers on the day. A really nice day for Kevin Knowles. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you're seeing Keon Coleman looks really comfortable out there today. Mossed one of the veterans. It looked like a flashback of Sunday night. Jordan Travis is continuing to stay dialed in. So you're, at least in my opinion, you're seeing what you want to see coming off a win against a top five opponent, and then matched up against what looks like on paper is a team that's very overmatched.
Mm-hmm. I think Fabo too, if he's able to get really clicking, and he can get back to being that starting defensive tackle caliber, then that's something that I'm keeping an eye on too going into this game. Primarily, just seeing how well he can get some more snaps in too, and just seeing that he's able to take on those 2 O linemen in that drill is always impressive to me. He's always been that kind of caliber of a player to bring some really like a thrust on the inside there. And so we'll see if he can bring that on this upcoming Saturday, where Florida State is going to hope to be able to bring in a lot of their younger depth too later on in this game. You would hope to see some of these second stringers and third stringers, some of these true freshmen that have been flashing since arriving in Tallahassee, see them get into the game. That's another thing that I'd like to see out of Florida State. They're going to have to take care of business though, and make sure that they've put this game away no matter what. But, I'd like to see some of these guys get in, get their reps and get out type of deal. But just to see Fabo get to that full 100% is something I'll be monitoring to start this 2023 season. Anything else from practice? Any quotes wise that maybe stood out? I know some of the reporters were asking Tatum Bethune about the hit that he put on Jaden Daniels. Saying
Tommy had that one. I don't know.
Just how that he was just talking about. That's kind of just put yourself in that position, you're going to get hit like that. But yeah, this team should be good. Do you want to just get the game preview now? There's not much of practice observations that we need to really dial into. It seems like
I would just say the only other things is you're seeing some more signs from Blake Nicholson. He's continuing to pop up consistently during practice, sitting there with that oar designation at one of the linebacker spots alongside Omar Graham, and he got in briefly on Sunday night. It's not going to surprise me if he continues to earn some snaps on that defensive side of the ball. I mean, he brings some real athleticism to the position that not a lot of guys on Florida State's roster have. And then on the flip side, Hakeem Williams, I mean, we're just continuing, we talked about the blocking, but then you're continuing to just see those strides of receiver just becoming more polished as a route runner, being in the right spots, having his head around for the ball. Some very impressive strides from two of Florida State's most highly rated recruits in that 2023 class.
Same Blake Nicholson got in briefly, might be stretching it. He had one snap. But, at least he got in.
Hey, it's briefly.
Slimming. Very slim. But yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to in this game. Maybe seeing some of these youngsters. But let's jump into this game preview. Won't have to spend too much time on it, maybe. But Florida State's going to be taking on Southern Miss in their home opener to begin the 2023 season. Florida State's going to be kicking off at 8:30 on the ACC network. Southern Miss is coming into this game at 1-0 after beating Alcorn State by a pretty hefty amount, which was pretty dominating.
42-14, I believe.
Yeah, it was 40-14.
40-14. You
40.
You got to pause.
14.
Yeah. Great. I'm sure everybody needs to know that. But Billy Wiles, love that name. Billy Wiles is the quarterback for Southern Miss this last weekend, 21-28, 267 yards, 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. Casson is one of their wide receivers that you want to keep an eye out for. Went over 100 yards, 5 receptions and a touchdown. They put up 441 yards in their first game. Florida State coming into this, we already talked about it, could come up high and live onto that, hype that they had on Sunday night, yada, yada, yada. But they're going to have to come and make sure they play prepared. And, Southern Miss has by far been looking at this game all off season, preparing for it nonetheless. But it's tough to do, like I was saying, for Brian Kelly to kind of guess on what Florida State's going to do with some of these transfers and how they're going to maneuver them around on the field, at least offensively and a few guys defensively. But we got a game on Saturday in Doak. It's going to feel good to be back in Tallahassee. A little late nighter, nothing better, but looking forward to be back up there in Tallahassee to watch the Seminoles play some football.
It's going to be an interesting little matchup, because these sides, they do have some familiarity with one another. Mike Norvell and Will Hall coached together at Memphis for one season back in 2018. Norvell was obviously the head coach of Memphis at the time, and Hall was the coach tight ends on staff that season. They ended up making a run to the conference championship, finished 8-6, I believe. But, so they know each other pretty well going into this matchup. We even heard Will Hall say, I believe it was on Tuesday, talking about Florida State. He said that this might be the best team that he's ever coached against during his career as a head coach, and went on to explicitly state that they played against Alabama in 2021, and that team obviously went on to win the national championship, and that he thinks Florida State might be a little bit better than the Crimson Tide were that year. So I don't know if he's just blowing, some smoke up Florida State's ass to keep them comfortable going into Saturday night. We saw what Brian Kelly did, really riled the guys up, and that didn't work out during the second half for LSU. So I don't know if he's just trying to stay low key, but I mean, either way, some nice remarks from Will Hall. But I mean, Mike Norvell even said the same thing. They both kind of have an idea probably of what they think the other one's going to run. But I mean, there are going to be some shifts in philosophy, obviously, on both sides.
Yeah, I love the coach speak mind games from Southern Miss's coach. You went from Brian Kelly, who's like, "Oh yeah, we're going to go smack their ass." And you got this coach going, "Oh man, they're really great. I don't know if we're going to stand a chance." Like Bama, I love it.
Might be a smart move on their part.
Yeah, and obviously Norvell is going to. I really think he's going to get these guys focused. But like we were saying earlier, Southern Miss has a little bit of talent. Frank Gore Jr. didn't play a ton last week, but we've talked a few times in the offseason, somewhat jokingly, somewhat seriously, that he was crazy in their bowl game. They have 2 running backs between him and Clark, who Clark played a bunch last week. And then you mentioned him, Jacarius Gaston He's a fun little player.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Southern Miss, just to note, they actually lost to Alabama in 2021, 63-14. So if he thinks Florida State's better, I'm interested to see what happens on Saturday night.
Yeah. Nah,
It's gonna be fun. Southern Miss has a solid defense. They even last year, granted it's Miami, but the Miami game I think was 30-7 last year, and then they beat Tulane 27-24. So, could get a little interesting. They've got a really good safety, but I don't think any one of us is expecting anything too crazy.
I think the key really is for Florida State's defense to start a lot faster this week. Go ahead and get Southern Miss out of a rhythm and, allow the offense to do what they do, which we saw consistently against LSU on Sunday night. And I think the Seminoles have a chance here to have a pretty successful game on defense. Logan noted quarterback Billy Wiles earlier. This is actually last week was his first career start. So, I mean, now his second career appearance at Southern Miss, he's going to be going into a rocking Doak Campbell Stadium to take on a top 5 opponent. It's going to be a pretty hefty task.
However, he did start his career at Clemson, which I think should be noted. So he does have some talent.
Yeah, I'm looking at too if they're going to be rushing quite a bit. I liked how Florida State was able to stop the runs primarily in the second half for Florida State on defense against LSU, and just evaluating that into Lundy, making that improvement there. And you already know what you're getting out of Kalen DeLoach and Tatum Bethune, who had a big game. And then, if we're able to see some Omar Graham Jr. as well, who's got some really great instincts and intelligence, watches film nicely, I think Florida State will be just fine there, and some run game defense. And we should see a little bit of a sighting of Blake Nicholson, who, we've heard some really good things about, making some strides as well in the latter half of fall camp. And I think there's going to be some good opportunities for some of these linebackers to get in there and get some reps. So, which Florida State would really heavily like if you're going to make a long postseason push.
That'll be huge.
Yeah, I don't have anything else. Like, get in, get out.
Get in and get out. Get in and get out.
I think Florida State, they're definitely going to need to limit big plays on Saturday night. We saw LSU. They weren't really able to consistently put drives together. It was really a chunk play or two that allowed them to get downfield. And then, we'd see them sputter out in the red zone or on a 4th down attempt. So as long as Florida State can prevent Southern Miss from hitting those 20-plus yard plays, which, against Alcorn State, they only had 3 plays of 30-plus yards, then you've got to feel really comfortable about FSU's chances, not letting a team go on a long drive.
Even despite the lack of big plays, though, their top 2 receivers in Caston and Latrell Jones, I think they both averaged over 20 yards per reception. So they're capable of making those big plays.
And that's what they're going to try to do, then capitalize on, is going deep and try to go get those one-on-one shots that they're able to accurately get down the field. But we got to rely a lot on Ventrell Cypress, which there was a few times too during the LSU game. There was one point where LSU was going for some points, and it was a little nerve-wracking there where Ventrell didn't turn his head around, and that's something that, looking back at film, they're Coach Sertan is certainly going to, sit down with him and make sure that's done, because they want to get the ball taken away. And that's been a huge emphasis this whole entire offseason. But if you're going to see Southern Miss take these shots, there's going to be some one-on-one opportunities that you're going to have to take ball. So, I really like what we saw from Renato Green last week. He's going to have, seems like he's going to have a big season if he continues to play that way. But, I'm keeping a close eye on Ventrell Cypress, and some of these other guys are going to get some opportunities, like Azare Thomas, which, LSU was going heavily at him quite a bit. And there were some times where LSU were just making some drops, and Azare wasn't in coverage at the right and hip by hip and was out of it. But we'll see let's see if, Southern Miss looked at some film on that and they decided to do the same thing going against 20.
In these passing situations, you've also got to remember they bring Florida State's defensive line into play. And Southern Miss, they are coming into this with a somewhat experienced offensive line. I think all 5 guys that they have this year started at least 5 games last year for them. So, there is some experience and some continuity there. But at the same time, they allowed 4 sacks against Alcorn State. Now, only 2 of those were with the starting offensive line, I believe, because the backup got sacked twice. But, we just saw what Florida State did against LSU with that defensive front. You've got to imagine that they feel even more confident entering this matchup against Southern Miss.
Yeah, it's not like Brett Favre's back there anymore. It's not 1989. They should be able to. No, thankfully, because I think Florida State lost that game in 1989 to Southern Miss.
They did.
So, I really think this defensive front's going to get after it. I'd be surprised if they end up with less than 5 sacks, honestly.
And then it should be expected for sure. After what we saw, it should be mandatory almost. But yeah, the line's at 30.5 in Florida State's favor. Over under is at 53. I think that's a little off.
That's low.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So make sure you slam the over, please, everybody, because my score is for at least Florida State's going to be the over on that all by itself. So if you want to make some money, put some money in your pocket, or at least add it to one of your parlays, go right ahead. We need sports betting. What are we doing here, Florida? I thought maybe tomorrow we'd have Hard Rock launching back up, but come on, man. And once we get Hard Rock up, we need a sponsorship because I can spend 10 minutes helping build a little parlay right here. Sit right here, put together Johnny Wilson, Jaheim Bell, over under yards here, all different kinds of things. Come on now. Let's get it. We'd have a whole segment dedicated for it. We're just waiting down here in Florida. It amazes me that we're so behind in the state. Is that everything? I'm ready to give a score prediction. It's been a crazy week. We deserve a little bit of a shorter pod as we go into the rest of the season. These are going to be longer, but we might as well utilize this short period of time while we can.
Well,
what do you got another Southern Miss fun fact?
I do want to note just real quick on the defensive side of the ball for Southern Miss. They were really effective against Alcorn State as far as limiting them through the air. Gave up 0 passing yards in the first half, only 44 for the game. Obviously, we're expecting that to change a little bit with now Jordan Travis throwing to Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman and 10 or 15 other guys out there. But it's going to be interesting to see because they're clearly in a rhythm coming off last week. They do have veteran safety Jay Stanley in that defensive backfield. He actually had 2 interceptions in the first quarter against Alcorn State, and it's coming off a season where he was able to pick off 5 passes. So he's going to be a guy around the football a lot, going to be up to Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson to do what they do and win those matchups.
I honestly think Florida State's going to really try to reestablish the run game in this one. They want to get the gears turning after what was a disappointing performance in the run game against LSU. I think they might carry the ball 40 plus times in this game.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised. And I also think that this is going to be a very big game for Jared Verse. He did make an impact. It wasn't really on the stat sheet as much on Sunday night. He was still really effective against the Tigers. I mean, they took away his strip sack, obviously, which I still think was a fumble. I mean, it was extremely close. But
his arm was going forward just barely by the time he got there.
It was very close, but finished with 2 tackles and a pass breakup against LSU. I think he's going to pin his ears back this weekend and go for it all against Southern Miss. Multiple sacks.
Can I go to jail for giving betting advice and not making sure I give a notice afterwards?
Nah, they only go after crypto people now. You're good.
Okay, sweet deal. We're Gucci. I promise I don't bet overseas. I promise.
I do.
There we go. All right, gentlemen, let's get to it. I went first last week and gave my score prediction. Who wants to go between Florida State, Southern Miss, 8:30, the best network there is, the ACC network, the same commercial over and over and over again. I feel bad for the people that won't be in Doak, praying for you guys like VZ. Prayers up as you have to deal with the ACC network. But
yeah, well, hopefully the TV timeouts aren't as long as they were on Sunday because the TV timeouts were insane Sunday night. I was beating my head against the rail in front of me.
Does that have to do with the new rule change? I saw people on Twitter complaining about it because they what is it? They cut off the time of the game, but they give more time for commercials now.
All the TV timeouts were, I think, either 3.5 minutes or 4 minutes. And, in that second quarter, I think there was 3 or 4 of them.
One of the most irritating things to me, no matter what NFL football is, boom, kickoff, You already had a commercial, then you do kickoff, and here comes another commercial before the offense takes the field. It is so extremely irritating. I want to bash a hammer.
Something similar happened in the LSU game. I want to say someone called a timeout. I forget who it was.
There was back-to-back TV timeouts.
Commercial, and then I think it was a punt right after, and then another commercial. I'm like, what are we doing?
TV timeout, one play, TV timeout.
And I think that's kind of why Florida State's offense was out of rhythm in that first half, is because there's so many breaks, and there's a few times where Jordan Travis, Tate Rodemaker, Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, and Jaheim Bell were just standing to the side, just throwing passes back and forth, trying to stay warmed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I will say I'm appreciative sometimes of those timeouts, definitely from this game, because we're putting out all these highlight quick hitters to NoleGameDay.com and then trying to get those pieces out. So I enjoy just a nice little 2-minute, but I felt bad for everybody watching on TV. It was ridiculous how many timeouts for TVs were being called. But you know what? When you're on national television, your only game on ESPN and ABC, you're going to take full advantage of that opportunity and run their ads. So,
especially when it's the most of your game of the weekend.
Yeah. It is. What's going on with Miami real quick? They got like a BOGO going on, like Publix Pub Sub. What are we doing here? We got BOGO. You buy Texas A&M tickets, which is going to last a quarter, and then you get free tickets to whoever in the F they're playing next. Some funny stuff right there. I've never seen anything like that. And
yeah, I've never seen a Power 5 school do buy one get one. It's pretty funny.
It's just, I don't even think that we can joke about it.
Yeah. And it's not even like it's BOGO for them. It's not even like it's BOGO for bad teams. You buy a ticket for Texas A&M and you get a ticket for Georgia Tech. Like those are games that you should be going to anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's hilarious to me. But all right, score predictions. What are we thinking here, gentlemen? Go ahead and give them out. VZ, you want to go?
Yeah, I'll lead us off. I think it's going to be kind of like what I was saying last week, where I think Florida State's playmakers are going to just end up being too much for, a defense that is pretty solid. And I think Florida State's really going to sell it to stop the run on the other end, really stop Frank Gore Jr., stop Clark, and force their receivers to make plays on islands, which if they were okay doing that last week against LSU, which if you go back and watch those goal line situations, they were perfectly fine letting Renardo Green and Fentrell Cypress work and stack the box with 8 or 9. I wouldn't be surprised if they keep doing that in this game. I've got Florida State winning 49-13.
Pretty significant win there.
Yeah, I honestly would have had Florida State with more points, but I think by midway through the third quarter, the starters coming on, you're getting some backups in there.
Kind of agree with you. I think the plan for Florida State this weekend, hopefully, if everything plays out how you're expecting, you play your starters that first half and then maybe give them a drive or two into the third quarter, make sure the game is standing pat, and then you start working in the reserves. Logan was talking about getting true freshmen playing time. I think we'll see a lot of true freshmen on the field this weekend. I would imagine, 12 plus, getting some hopefully legitimate action out there on either offense or defense. But, I've really liked how Florida State has come out for this week of practice. I think you're starting to see that mature mindset of just having so many veterans and guys that have been at Florida State for a long time or have played a lot of college football, at the FBS level. You're seeing a really experienced team. And yeah, like I said, just the way that they performed the last couple of days, it makes me feel confident, even though this is a short week. At the same time, I do think, Florida State, they're not going to really push to run up the score on Southern Miss this weekend with the relationship between Mike Norvell and Will Hall. So I'm going to go Florida State 51, Southern Miss 13.
Okay. That feels good. Well over the over. Making sure we're taking care of business there.
Logan's about to say something absurd, like
I feel it.
Like 66-3.
78.
No, don't tempt me. Don't tempt me, because they completely walloped what I predicted last week, and that's a whole different talent that's on the field, and Florida State's coming into this way more healthier. Florida State's got depth. They've got starters and they're too deep as well that will be hitting the field in the third and fourth quarter. I feel comfortable with seeing Tate Rodemaker out there. Rodney Hill's going to get a lot of reps. Your younger wide receivers like Hakeem Williams, Vondravius Jacobs, hopefully will get some PT. Kentron Poitier is fully 100%. Going to see a lot of him. It's gonna be dominance throughout it all. I think Florida State wins 56-13. No longer playing around with some of these short margins. It's going to be a fat one.
We're just
I
dead
kind of want
set
to
on
go even
Southern Miss scoring
further.
13.
Do what?
We're just dead set on Southern Miss scoring 13. We all said it.
Yeah, we are. We're riding together and holding hands a lot this season so far.
Yeah, well,
that might be what we have to do, though, gentlemen.
Also, shout out to Noel Gifts with the collaborative podcast score sheet.
Yeah.
Talk about added pressure.
Yeah, no, that's one of the reasons why I'm like, God, I gotta change. I gotta watch out for my margins now. God dang. Let me just focus on the win column first, but damn, I gotta watch out for point differential. Some of these margins, goodness gracious, help me please. Primetime Mac is saying Dustin Hill is going to score his first touchdown. I could feel that. I could certainly feel that. Would not be shocked if Mugnerville lines something up for him as well. Jordan Travis tried to go deep with him. They had the chemistry, man. That's one thing that I'd learned from that play alone. Even though Dustin Hill didn't come down with it, he tried his hardest. But
and it hit him in the hands. It was a great throw, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, J-Trap rolling out, trying to get out of the pocket, and then pointing, go up, and Dustin, it was seamless. That chemistry has been built, and he went up and tried his hardest, but still, yeah, we could see maybe some Dustin Hill touchdown in Tallahassee. Couldn't imagine, man. Doak's going to go wild for that once that happens. Any games we're watching this weekend? I'm looking at the slate right now, nothing outside of number 11 Texas versus Alabama really stands out to me too much unless I'm not seeing
Texas A&M, Miami will at least be interesting.
Yeah, first quarter interesting.
Notre Dame, NC State, I think will be fun. And then honestly, Ole Miss and Tulane could be a shootout.
Could see it.
A lot of points.
A lot of points. That the over under might be 100.
Yeah, it might be, honestly. Another one I needed worth mentioning here. Yeah, Colorado, Nebraska. Nebraska's got to get a win here. They got to get a win.
I'm not seeing it with Nebraska.
Telling you, next week we gotta pick like 5 to 10 games and just all give a quick prediction.
I'm okay with that. We also get a rematch of last year's classic, Appalachian State UNC.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Maybe they'll pull it off this time, but I don't think so.
That one's going to be a must watch for me too.
Yeah, I don't think this Miami game is going to be close whatsoever. Jimbo just knows what to do against Miami, and I think that will be done the early second quarter potentially. I will say, though, at least from between Florida and Miami after week one, Miami looks better coach, definitely from last year, than what Florida put on the table against Utah. Just noting that right now, but there's not much
Miami of Ohio.
Huh?
They played Miami of Ohio.
I don't care. Florida.
Yeah, but there was talk from.
How do you determine if they're well coached after that one?
You can determine a lot of things from coaching.
And
no matter
listen,
who you're playing.
Miami of Ohio came in saying we're going to show them who the real Miami is. So there was a point to be made.
They showed them. They showed them.
And we'll finish off here. Will Reed going 81-17 Florida State on Saturday night. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us this evening. As always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. Make sure you hit the like button before y'all leave on YouTube. Subscribe so you get notified every time we release a new episode on YouTube, along with all of our podcast platforms on iTunes and the rest. Will be up there on Saturday. Looking forward to be back in Tallahassee. If you see us out there, make sure you say what's up. Don't be shy. We'll have full coverage for you all across our socials, including NoleGameDay.com, and we'll have our instant reaction here on this channel probably at 12:30 o'clock in the morning, because
I was thinking one.
Later than that, buddy.
This is a ridiculous time that's on the East Coast. I'm like looking down here at our late night games, Wisconsin, Washington State at 7:30. You've got Oregon State, UC Davis at 9 o'clock, Stanford, USC, 10:30, and then Florida State, 8:30 o'clock. That makes total sense. So
I mean, we went live at 12:20 last week for a 7:30 kick, so probably like 1:15.
Yeah, see if ACC wants to run the same commercials as ABC and ESPN did. we'll see. But yeah, appreciate everybody hanging out with us. We will talk to you guys on Sunday morning, actually. So, and also go Steelers, baby. We are winning the AFC North and most likely going to the AFC Championship.
There you go.
I appreciate everybody fully dialed in to Kenny Pickett. We're taking it to the crib, baby. George Pickens, make sure you get your Offensive Player of the Year bets in. I'll take care of it for you. Peace out. Enjoy the weekend.